As the Team's Head Brass by Edward Thomas, 1878 to 1917. As the team's head brass flashed out on the turn, the lovers disappeared into the wood. I sat among the boughs of the fallen elm that strewed an angle of the fallow, and watched the plough narrowing a yellow square of charlock. Every time the horses turned, instead of treading me down, the ploughman leaned upon the handles to say or ask a word about the weather, next about the war. Scraping the share, he faced towards the wood and screwed along the furrow till the brass flashed once more. The blizzard felled the elm whose crest I sat in, by a woodpecker's round hole. The ploughman said, "When will they take it away?" "When the war is over." So the talk began. 1 minute and an interval of 10. A minute more and the same interval. "Have you been out there?" "No, and I don't want to, perhaps." "If I could only come back again, I should. I could spare an arm. I shouldn't want to lose a leg. If I should lose my head, why, so. I should want nothing more." "Have many gone from here?" "Yes, many lost. Yes, a good few. Only 2 teams work on the farm this year. One of my mates is dead. The second day in France they killed him. It was back in March. The very night of the blizzard, too. Now, if he had stayed here, we should have moved the tree, and I should not have sat here. Everything would have been different, for it would have been another world. Ay, and a better, though if we could see all might seem good. Then the lovers came out of the wood again. The horses started, and for the last time I watched the clods crumble and topple over after the ploughshare and the stumbling team. Okay, let's see. Edward Thomas. He was a soldier during the First World War, and sadly he was killed during the First World War. And this poem, it describes a scene between somebody sitting on a fallen tree and a ploughman who is ploughing the field, and each time he comes past they chat, and to begin with they chat about the weather, and then they start to chat about the war and the bad things that have happened from it. I think the poem's quite descriptive as well. So let's see. As the team's head brass flashed out on the turn, the lovers disappeared into the wood. So the team, this is a team of horses, and normally they have a harness over them. Yeah, and this harness has pieces of brass on it, decorative pieces, and the ploughman goes down the field and then turns around and comes back, and each time he turns there's a flash, or the sun reflects off this brass. And at that moment, 2 lovers disappeared into a wood. I sat among the boughs of the fallen elm. So I was sitting on the trunk of an elm tree that had fallen, that strewed an angle of the fallow. Okay, so that actually it went across a little piece of the field. Yeah, and watched the ploughman narrowing a yellow square. So I'm watching the ploughman going backwards and forwards. a narrow square of charlock, and he's ploughing the field, and the yellow square, the charlock, is a plant that is growing in the field, and each time he makes a line with his plough, then there's this square of charlock which is slowly decreasing. Every time the horses turned, instead of treading me down, the ploughman leaned upon the handles to say or ask a word. So every time the ploughman turned the horses to go in the other direction, instead of walking over me with his horses, the ploughman, he stopped on the handles, and he said something to me, or he asked something to me. So to begin with, about the weather, next about the wall. Scraping the share, he faced towards the wood. So the share is the metal piece in the plough that is pulled through the earth, and mud collects on that. So he's scraping it clean. And then he faces towards the wood. He turns round and screwed along the furrow till the brass flashed once more. And he went along his furrow, his line, until he got to the end and turned around, and the brass flashed. So the brass flashed is saying he turned around once more. The blizzard felled the elm whose crest I sat in by a woodpecker's round hole, the ploughman said. Okay, so the ploughman, next time he came past, told me that a blizzard, a snowstorm, felled, knocked over the elm tree whose crest I sat in which I was sitting, next to a round hole made by a woodpecker, woody woodpecker. They make holes in wood. When will they take it away? So this is the person sitting asking. When the war's over. Yeah, so that tree's going to stay there until the war is finished. So the talk began, and so we talked 1 minute and an interval of 10. So we talked for a minute, and then he went off and did a furrow and came back. A minute more, and the same interval. So we talked for another minute, and then he went on his way and came back. Have you been out? This is the ploughman asking the person sitting. Have you been out to the war? Have you been in the war? No, I said. And I don't want to, perhaps. Yeah, so I don't want to go. If only I could come back again, I should. So if I was certain I wasn't going to die, then I would go to the war. I could spare an arm, so maybe if I went to the war, I'd be lucky and I'd only lose an arm. I shouldn't want to lose a leg. Yeah, if I went out, I could lose a leg. That would be terrible. And if I should lose my head, why, I should want nothing more. So he's now thinking what would happen if he went out to the war. He could get killed. Yeah. Have many gone from here? This is the person sitting there. So have many people gone to the war? Yes, many lost. So yes, many people have gone. Many people have been lost. Yes, a good few, so a large number of people. And this is also echoing that they were good people. Only 2 teams work on the farm this year. So there are only 2 teams of horses that are ploughing the fields this year. So I think in the past there were many more teams and much more food was produced, but not this year. Most of the men are either dead or have gone to the war. And then the ploughman's talking again. One of my mates is dead. One of the people who worked with me is dead. The second day in France they killed him. What a waste. He was killed on the second day in France. It was back in March, so it was in March, the very night of the blizzard too. So he was killed on the same day that the blizzard blew down the tree. And here we've got the blowing down of the tree echoing the death of his mate, of his friend, of his workmate. So both have been knocked down and killed. Now, if he had stayed here, we should have moved the tree. So if he'd stayed, we would have moved that tree, and that's why it's still sitting there. And I should not have sat here. So, and then I wouldn't be sitting here, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, and the world would be very different. Everything would have been very different. So the world would have been a very different world. For it would have been another world. Yeah, things would have been different. Things would have been better. And a better, though, if we could see all might seem good. So, from my point of view, everything would be better if we hadn't had this war. And then he says, however, if we could see all, if we could see everything, if we understood the future, then everything might seem good, that the war might actually seem good. Yeah, it might be a good idea if we knew that this was actually avoiding something much worse. Then the lovers came out of the wood again. So if you remember at the poem, these two lovers went into the wood at the beginning and they come out afterwards. And I think maybe here this pair of lovers, they're trying to avoid the war. They're outside the conversation. They're outside the poem. Yeah, and they want to stay outside of all this. The horses started. So the ploughman started making the horses go forward. And for the last time, I watched the clods crumble and topple over after the ploughshare and the stumbling team. So I think this is the very last furrow in the fields. And I watched the clods. A clod of earth is a big piece of earth stuck together. And these broke and they fell over after the ploughshare, after the plough cutting bit went through them. And after the team of horses that was stumbling was working with difficulty, maybe stumbling, what the society is stumbling as well. So enough. If you enjoyed the video, give it a rating, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. As the Team's Brass Head by Edward Thomas.